Well, here we are, the last Devil May Cry game in the marathon and the latest one so far. After the less than positive reception for DMC, Capcom scrapped the idea of creating a new series. Then 6 years after DMC and 11 years after Devil May Cry 4, Capcom finally decided to return to the original story arc that everybody really wanted, a sort of long-awaited continuation, with Devil May Cry 5, released earlier this year. It was a little up in the air as to whether or not the Devil May Cry series was even going to carry on with how poor the feedback was for DMC, and with Devil May Cry 4 not selling nearly as well as Capcom hoped for. But during E3 2018, we got the official announcement trailer for Devil May Cry 5, showing quite a lot of Nero gameplay, insinuating that he was going to be the main focus. However, at the end of the trailer, we got the return of old school Dante, silver hair, long red coat, and a 5 o'clock shadow. He wasn't the immature potty mouth like he was in DMC. The Dante we know and love was back to kick some demon ass and look amazing as he slices them in two. As a result of this, and the combat playing more like the other games again, Devil May Cry 5 has been a massive success, in case you somehow haven't heard people praising this game to the high heavens already. Fans got what they wanted since the 4th game, and some have even gone as far to say that it's their new favorite in the series after Devil May Cry 3. Those are some pretty big claims, and I'm inclined to agree, which is weird to me because when I first saw the announcement trailer, yeah, I was looking forward to playing it, but at this point I was out of my Devil May Cry craze and too busy checking the internet every day for Kingdom Hearts 3 news. Once I was finished with that game though and did my review for it, I was ready for some more Devil May Cry action. It had been a couple of years since I played DMC for the first time, and about 5 or 6 years since I played the other 4 games, and suddenly going through Devil May Cry 5 had rekindled my love for the series and reminded me why I enjoy these games. But I'll go a little more into that after we dive into the story one more time in this marathon. Devil May Cry 4 left things somewhat open for interpretation, so this could have some potential to be interesting. Here's the time code if you haven't finished the game yet. Now let's talk about Devil May Cry 5. Well, it certainly doesn't waste any time. We're thrown right into a huge battle against the new baddie of the week, Urizen, that Dante, Trish, Lady, Nero, and this Kylo Ren double named V are trying to take down. Urizen summons forth the Qlipoth, which in religion is usually known as the reverse tree of life. But in Devil May Cry 5, it's a gigantic demonic tree that's growing all around the city and piercing people with its branches for their blood. Our heroes get their leathered butts handed to them by Urizen as he puts Dante and his 2 sidekicks into a coma and shatters the rebellion in the process, with Nero and V being the only ones that escape. Turns out this is all a flash forward though, as we cut to a few months earlier with Nero in his garage and is confronted by a dying man in a cloak who yanks the demon arm right out of Nero and steals the Yamato. After some time healing up, Nero seems to be running the Devil May Cry business on the road with his new companion Nico, an engineer that builds Nero's new robotic arms of many flavors and forever stuck in the 90s with her lingo.
Hey, you two! Dinner's ready!
Be right there! Hey, why don't you go ahead? I'm gonna finish up here.
I'll try to save you some. Not.
Did she really just do the not thing in 2019? Go back to your kids' sports commercials and Sunny D's. Anyway, Nero's new mission is to search and rescue Dante while slaying any demons along the way, and V's mission is to look for the forbidden fruit of the Qlipoth that's meant to make whoever consumes it king of the underworld. Shortly into Nero's quest, he runs into a captured lady who's been used as life support for one of the bosses, while V discovers the Devil's Sword Sparta stuck in a hunk of rock that also appears to have been hiding the comatose Dante underneath. V tries to wake up Dante via body skewering because I guess he's noticed how many times Dante can take impalement in this series, but he awakens just in time, springing back into action to take revenge on Urizen, and he eventually frees Trish from another demon, but don't think for a second this means she and Lady will join Dante in battle. More on that later. Trish instead learns from V that Urizen is in reality the demon half of Virgil, and V is also revealed to be the human half of Virgil. Apparently Virgil somehow used the Yamato to split his body into 2 entities, but are still part of the same person. So if you think Kingdom Hearts logic, V would be the heartless side of Virgil, while Urizen would be the nobody. V, however, seems to be getting weaker and weaker with every passing day, hence the cane, and we don't know how much longer he has left in this world. I guess this half of Virgil doesn't have a very big lifespan. Back to Dante anyway, as he absorbs the power of the Devil's Sword Sparta to unleash his full demon power. Again. and he steps in to help Nero as once more he attempts to face Urizen alone. Using his newfound abilities, Dante temporarily defeats the demon overlord, but Urizen sends himself off to the fruit of the Qlipoth with his brother following his trails. Meanwhile, Nero and V try to catch up to the two brothers as V explains the history between them to Nero, and after another boss, they make it to Dante, but Urizen is beaten once again. Then, for some unexplained reason, V suddenly decides to betray the others and merge with Urizen, reviving Virgil to his former glory, and surprisingly still voiced by Dan Southworth from Devil May Cry 3. Alright, this is a pretty baffling excuse to get Virgil back already, but then the first thing he does after being resurrected is leave Dante to regain his strength so that they can have a proper battle again, rather than taking care of him there and then. Dude, he's right there! Just finish him off and he won't interfere with your plans. I could understand if maybe the thrill of the fight was in Virgil's character, but it's not been established at any point as far as I'm aware, so he just seems like a dummy for letting him and Nero go. But to make things even more nonsensical, Nero wants to go after Virgil himself, trying to prove Dante wrong about being dead weight like he's been leading Nero to believe. But Dante then tries to stop him by revealing that Virgil is Nero's father and he can't have him killing his own kin. Where the hell did that come from? You're telling me that when Dante and Nero accidentally met each other in Devil May Cry 4, they just happened to also be related? Get the hell out of here. This just makes me ask the big question, who had sex with Virgil? Where is she, and why has she not shown up in this series yet? I thought Dante would be the ladies' man out of the two of them, but no, I was way off. Who knew that Virgil could be such a dreamboat? Jesus Christ. So after that bonkers revelation, Dante continues to chase Virgil, but has to fight V's familiars along the way, and they turn out to be discarded memories from when Virgil became Nilo Angelo in the original Devil May Cry. Doesn't really mean much at this point, and it never comes back into play, but it doesn't matter, they all get destroyed, and Dante is finally mano a mano with his twin brother. Nero also manages to make it to Dante and Virgil as the two of them are fighting, but not before calling Kyrie for a quick pep talk and still grabbing lines from the well-cared-for Book of Clichés.
You always know which path is right and which is wrong.
Kyrie motivates Nero to try and stop Dante and Virgil's rivalry, and that seems to be enough for Nero to interfere with the battle and unleash his full demon abilities, even growing his arm back. Why didn't he do that before? Dante is thrown out of the way as Nero takes on Virgil himself and expectedly wins. Don't know why the final boss theme is a J-pop song, by the way. I guess they took cliff notes from Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker. Virgil gives Nero the book V was holding to remember him by, and apparently beating the shit out of each other was all that was needed to convince Dante and Virgil to put an end to their shenanigans and have the two team up to destroy the roots of the Qlipoth. However, the roots are only accessible by a one-way portal to the underworld that'll seal up as soon as they enter, because of course there's always a damn sealing portal in these games. That should be a drinking game by now. Dante and Virgil dive through the portal, destroy the roots, and Nero escapes from the crumbling Qlipoth. Weeks later, Trish and Lady are hired for a new job requiring them to look for any significance to this game. Nero and Nico continue to take the demon-killing business portably, and Dante and Virgil now take part in friendly sparring as opposed to trying to kill each other, unknowing of their fate. Oh boy, where do I begin with this story? It's totally absurd and ridiculous like the other games, but it's a different kind of absurd and ridiculous this time. The previous entries tended to prefer spectacle and style over an engaging narrative, but Devil May Cry 5 seems to want to try and tell a deep, compelling story on top of that spectacle, which I can appreciate the effort. However, even though the story starts off par for the course, once you reach the last few stages and all the plot twists start coming out, it all begins to fall apart. The plot also loves to jump around in a non-linear fashion to make itself seem more epic and thought-provoking than it really is. And I'm not sure why Patty Lowell from the anime series gets a quick cameo via phone call. That was really random. Why was she there? And Trish and Lady, sweet Mary, what an utter waste of potential. I thought this would finally be the time where we got to see them join Dante in his newest mission and kick triple the amount of demon ass than Dante could do on his own. And when he first controlled Dante, it seemed like it was gonna go that route, but nope. Trish and Lady go on ahead of you, and moments later, they get knocked out and captured. Then when they are rescued, all they do is stay with Nero and Nico in the business van, never contributing anything else to the plot. Trish and Lady add nothing to Devil May Cry 5, and that is my biggest crime with it. I realize that's more of a personal grudge than with the story, but when I could see in earlier games that these girls are more than capable of handling themselves with demons in such an awesome fashion, bearing in mind that Lady is also human unlike Dante and Trish, I want to see them more in action. Devil May Cry 4 gave them better treatment because despite the levels being repeated, you at least got to play as Trish and Korean lady, but here, zilch. Not even in Bloody Palace mode, and that was a major disappointment. As for V, well, he's an okay enough character, but I didn't really find him that interesting overall. He seems to favor spouting exposition over having a personality. He's the mentor guiding Nero on his path and not much else. I found the familiars to be more intriguing than V. The Shadow and Nightmare familiars don't say anything, but you can still tell what they're thinking, and they're as loyal as they can be. The Griffin is the only one that doesn't stop flapping his gums no matter how hard you try, and I swear they wanted Gilbert Gottfried to voice him. You listen to one line from the Griffin, and you immediately think of Iago from Aladdin. I can just hear him saying, "Hey V, who's this Dante character?"
So close, though, so close. You got a lot of heart, kid, you really do, but you're a bit of a sissy in the strength department.
Oh, Jafar, you're too kind. I'm embarrassed. I'm blushing.
Thankfully, while the story is even more stupid than what Capcom usually puts out, and not just in Devil May Cry, I can assure you that the gameplay more than makes up for it. As soon as you start playing, you immediately forget about all the plot shortcomings and have too much of a good time slaying demon after demon, looking as handsome and amazing as you can be. But how does it do it? What immediately made me enjoy Devil May Cry 5 was that it's a 2019 game and it's not an open world sandbox title, to which I say, thank Christ. I don't know about you folks, but I am sick of open world sandbox games with meaningless objective after meaningless objective and traveling across a large empty plane that's only made to pad out the length. There are games that do this better than others, but building open worlds I feel can be a really great risk, especially with how companies like Ubisoft love to abuse this genre with the Assassin's Creed games that get a new entry almost every single year. Even God of War 4 kinda went this way, and in my opinion was one of the reasons it ended up missing the point of the entire series. So to see Devil May Cry 5 stick with a linear level design that best suited the gameplay style, this was such a breath of fresh air, which is ironic since this game doesn't change the formula much at all. We're back to playing as Nero and Dante, as well as the new kid on the block, V. However, this time we're not sticking with one character throughout an entire half of the game, but rather playing as each one in intervals. And in some levels you can choose which character you want to play as and travel through slightly different pathways. Let's start with Nero, since he's pretty much the main focus of the story again, whatever that might mean to you. He's not too dissimilar to how he played in Devil May Cry 4. Every ability Nero had is back at full force. He can grab enemies with his arm to do some critical damage, but I'm not sure if he can counter enemy attacks anymore. The effects of the blue rose can now linger for a little bit after charging up and shooting the enemy. Nero can rev up the Red Queen again for more powerful strikes, and also once again if you have the upgrades, revving at the precise moment will automatically charge up to 3 melee attacks, though the timing's not quite as strict as it was in the 4th game. Nero also has his new Devil Breakers to play around with. They're various robotic arms that he can equip and attack with in different ways. Some of them can be kinda cool, even if I can't remember all of their names, except for Rawhide, because I'm not able to say that without thinking of the Blues Brothers. It's neat that you can also buy Mega Man's Mega Buster as DLC, but you can't use it in Bloody Palace mode, so not much point in buying it outside of the story. The downside to Devil Breakers, aside from the inability to swap them on the fly, is that charging them or using them as a means of escaping enemy clutches does cause them to break and unable to repair it. You'll still find plenty of Devil Breakers on the floor, or you could simply purchase them in Nico's shop, so it's not the end of the world, but it's a shame that these things are so brittle. Nero's gameplay style overall can still get a little old after some time, but it's definitely better than it was in Devil May Cry 4. That much is certain, and I'm glad an improvement was made. Next up, let's talk about V, who's undoubtedly my least favorite character to play as. He doesn't attack enemies normally like Nero and Dante do, he instead orders his familiars to do the dirty work for him. The Shadow Familiar is used for general melee strikes, the Griffin essentially replaces the guns, and the Nightmare Familiar can be summoned by activating V's Devil Trigger. The Nightmare does a pretty good job attacking on its own, but after purchasing the upgrade for it, V can always control it himself if you want him to. I don't really trust myself with it though personally. My main issue with V's gameplay is that since I have to keep an eye on my familiars, not doing any of the fighting myself and making sure they don't lose all of their health and become temporarily disabled, I don't always have a clear idea of what's going on. Enemies don't die like they usually do either after reducing their health, as there's an extra step you need to do by having V perform the finishing blow. Why? I have no idea. And because of all that management making it difficult to keep up with the action, I don't really have much of a strategy with V. I find that simply mashing buttons tends to get me the best results. Even after purchasing so many new new abilities. V's thankfully only in a handful of missions, but with each one lasting around 20 to 30 minutes now, that's still a good chunk of time dedicated to him. And that's assuming you don't choose him during the levels with multiple pathways. I wouldn't say V's a terrible character to play as, but he's the weakest of the lineup as a whole, has to be said. But finally, after around the halfway point, 5 hours in, you get to control Dante, and yet again he is the best part of the game, bar none. Dante's back to his old ways of fighting, so no more grappling or rapidly changing weapons like in DMC, but he can still switch between guns and melee weapons at any time, and the styles make another graceful return. I've said it before and I'll say it again, the styles are the most unique aspect of a Devil May Cry game, and this one is no exception. They act just like they should do, and you can switch to another one on the fly like you could do in Devil May Cry 4. Nero's Devil Breakers are a really nice addition, but nothing beats the sheer amount of possibilities you can pull off with the different styles. If that wasn't enough already, Dante will eventually obtain his new Sin Devil Trigger. By consuming the normal Devil Trigger meter, you'll gradually fill up this orange meter above it, and once it's full, Dante can unleash even more hell with extremely powerful moves exclusive to that form, and can hit a whole ton harder on top of that. The weapon selection's fairly standard for the series. You've got your basic sword, fists, and kicks, and the nunchucks are back, which is awesome, but I also really enjoy using the Cavalier. It's a motorcycle Dante briefly uses and ends up splitting into two halves, but of course being Dante, he thinks to use these as weapons, and while it's a little slow compared to other options, it still freaking hurts and can even break through armor. It's pretty useful during certain situations. The guns are also stuff you've seen before, but you get to use Ladies Kalina on again, and after some time you can carry two of them simultaneously, which can be absolutely chaotic. The only new one in your arsenal is Dr. Faust, and it's just plain bizarre. It's a fedora hat you put on and spend red orbs to attack enemies with, but can also earn more red orbs if you throw the hat onto an enemy and kill them. You can accumulate a crap load of red orbs if you use it correctly, but I haven't mastered it yet by any means. Let me know of any tips if you have them. I didn't think it was possible, but they managed to outrank Devil May Cry 3 in terms of gameplay. The combat is undoubtedly the best the series has ever had, and even though the level design and environments are a bit lacking compared to earlier entries, fighting demons kicks too much ass for you to really harp on it. One of my favorite things about it is the announcer that reads out the stylish rank as you increase it. This was in DMC as well, but here the guy absolutely gets into his role, and it only makes getting a triple S rank all the more sweet as he's shouting smokin' sexy style. Now, if only I didn't think the story was one of the weakest in the series, but it really is, guys. I like how you can actually get an alternate ending by defeating Urizen in the prologue, and Dante's just as much fun as he's ever been, but this was a pretty damn stupid plot altogether. The non-linearity just feels pointless, and the story in general gets more and more preposterous as it goes, with some rather forgettable boss fights, honestly. Graphically, on the other hand, oh my god, this game's gorgeous. It's using the new RE engine that Capcom's been putting in their AAA titles since Resident Evil 7 released a couple of years ago, including the remake of the second Resident Evil that came out shortly before Devil May Cry 5. Everything looks absolutely incredible. It's crazy how far in technology we've come in 18 years. And not surprisingly, this is the best looking Devil May Cry game to date. In fact, story aside, the game itself is pretty damn amazing, easily one of the greatest Devil May Crys in a long time. Both critics and fans seem to be really enjoying it, and for very good reason. Devil May Cry 5 went back to what made the series so appealing, and shocker, it kicked DMC's ass. Without going into story spoilers for those who skip the synopsis, it is a little unclear where the series will go from here. I feel like Capcom have pretty much done all they can to keep things fresh and engaging enough to warrant sequels. Who knows though, after all, technology is constantly changing, and maybe in 10 years time we'll find Devil May Cry 5 dated. As of right now, however, at least until Persona 5 The Royal comes out, I'll most likely find myself coming back to this game again and again to unlock all the upgrades, clear the Bloody Palace, get the best ranks possible, and search for all of the secret missions, which are a lot harder to find now, by the way. Outside of the tutorial, I only found one in my first playthrough. Overall, if previous Devil May Cry games didn't convince you to try them, or if you've just based them on the second one, play Devil May Cry 5 instead. You won't be disappointed. So there we have it. There are no more Devil May Cry games to talk about for a long while, and now I'm gonna do a similar countdown to what I did for the Kingdom Hearts reviews, ranking each title from worst to best. Let's begin. Completely unoriginal opinion, but Devil May Cry 2 is most definitely in last place for failing to improve the gameplay in any shape or form from the original and just being a dull time altogether. In 5th place is Devil May Cry 4 because while not a bad game by any means and even has slightly better combat than its predecessor, it still felt majorly unfinished with the repeated stages and it really brought the whole experience down. Number 4 is the very first Devil May Cry. It may not be as good as it was 18 years ago, but the atmosphere is still awesome and it still plays fine. In 3rd place is DMC. The writing was incredibly weak, but I love performing wicked fast combos and constantly switching my melee weapons so easily. Alright, now we come to the big one. Which game is better between Devil May Cry 3 and Devil May Cry 5? Both games have their pros and cons. The third game has the better story, environments, and boss fights, but the fifth game has the better combat as well as more characters to play as. This was one of the hardest decisions I've ever had to make in all of my years of doing this channel. Both Devil May Cry 3 and 5 are fantastic games and worth your time. I really need to stress that. But if I had to choose, second place goes to Devil May Cry 5 for having the best combat the series has ever had and gloriously returning to its roots. And finally, that leaves Devil May Cry 3 in first place. Mechanically, it's just shy of being perfect compared to Devil May Cry 5, and the ranking system is way harsher than that game, but the level variants and more engaging story really add that extra step. I'm really sorry to anyone who finds Devil May Cry 5 to be the better game, but second place is still great in my books. It means it was just this close to surpassing Devil May Cry 3, and it should be enjoyed in its own right. Actually, screw it, just play the whole series. All of them, except for Devil May Cry 2, each have a unique amount of entertainment to them, even the fourth one for as repetitive as it got. This has been a really fun marathon for me. I completely forgot how great Devil May Cry games can be, and I look forward to playing them again in the future. They helped create the spectacle fighter genre and are fondly remembered to this day for being simple to play but tough to master. And when you do master it, you feel awesome, as if you yourself are in the game, effortlessly swatting demons left and right, practically unstoppable. Okay, so now that we're done with Devil May Cry for some time, it's time to move on to the 100th review. You guys have made your votes and I'm extremely grateful for you doing so, though I warn you, this is gonna be a big project. Well, God help me. They finally decided to return to the original story arc and that everybody really wanted. Now I'm gonna do a similar countdown to what I did for the Kingdom Hearts reviews, ranking each title from best to worst. No, other way around. But the fifth game has the better combat and as well as more characters to play as. Damn it. But the fifth game has the better